it begins not with impact, but with light. A research station in Chile captures something unusual during a routine survey of the outer solar belt. A reflected glint, faint and unremarkable, except that it appears in a region previously mapped as empty. The astronomer marks it for follow-up observation, labels it Object 2026 QX7, and continues her shift. Within 18 hours, 3 other observatories confirm the anomaly. The object is moving, not drifting in stable orbit, but accelerating inward, drawn by gravitational forces that should not exist in that configuration. The size estimates come next, and they are immediately flagged as errors. The software recalculates, the numbers hold. The object measures 4,200 kilometers across, nearly 20% larger than Earth's moon, and its trajectory bends unmistakably toward the inner solar system. The discovery remains classified for 6 days, while verification protocols run their course. During this time, the object crosses the orbit of Neptune, its velocity climbing beyond predicted models. Surface temperatures on Earth register no change. Tides follow their ancient rhythms. Birds migrate on schedule. But in laboratories across 5 continents, astrophysicists begin constructing impact models using parameters never before applied to Earth scenarios. The mathematics are elegant and absolute. The object, now designated Apophis Major, will reach Earth's orbital path in 93 days. Its mass exceeds that of the Moon by 40%. Its velocity suggests an origin outside the normal planetary drift patterns, possibly expelled from a distant stellar system and captured by the Sun's gravity only recently in cosmic terms. When the announcement comes, it is delivered in measured tones by an international panel. The initial reaction is disbelief, then frantic verification through amateur telescopes and university observatories. Within hours, Apophis Major becomes visible to high-powered equipment as a dark sphere eclipsing background stars. It reflects almost no light, its surface composed of materials that absorb radiation across most spectrums. This makes it impossible to study in detail, but the gravitational effects it produces are undeniable. The Moon begins to drift, not dramatically, but measurably. Tidal patterns shift by centimeters, then by meters. Coastal cities notice the discrepancy first. High tides arrive 11 minutes early in Singapore. Low tides in Nova Scotia reach levels unseen in recorded history. Marine biologists observe confusion in sea turtle navigation and disruption in whale migration paths, as if the animals sense a distortion in the magnetic and gravitational fields they have followed for millennia. 40 days before projected intersection, the sky itself begins to change. Apophis Major becomes visible to the naked eye as a small, dark spot against the daytime blue, a void where stars disappear at night. It grows larger each day, an encroaching shadow that defies the comforting distance of celestial objects. Governments cease normal operations. Evacuation protocols are discussed, then abandoned as the scale of the threat becomes clear. There is nowhere to evacuate, no bunker deep enough, no distance sufficient. The object's gravitational influence now affects Earth's axial stability. The planet's rotation slows by fractions of a second daily. Days grow longer. Weather patterns collapse into chaos as atmospheric currents respond to the altered Coriolis effect. Hurricanes form in unusual latitudes. Jet streams fracture and reform. Temperature gradients steepen, producing storms of unprecedented intensity across every continent. 20 days remain, and the Moon tears itself apart. Not violently, but inexorably, as Apophis Major's gravitational field overcomes the forces that have held Earth's satellite intact for 4 billion years. Fragments begin to separate from the lunar surface, drifting into unstable orbits. Some fall toward Earth, burning as meteors across the night sky in displays that would be beautiful if they were not harbingers of annihilation. Others are captured by the approaching mass, drawn into spiraling trajectories around the intruder. The night sky becomes a chaotic dance of light and shadow. Tides surge and retreat multiple times within single hours, no longer following predictable cycles. Coastal cities flood, then empty, then flood again. Seismic activity increases as the Earth's crust responds to gravitational stress. Fault lines that have remained dormant for centuries rupture in sequence, Volcanoes awaken across the Pacific Ring of Fire, painting the atmosphere with ash that dims the sun and stains sunsets the color of old blood. You stand on a rooftop in a city that has lost its name to chaos. The evacuation orders ended days ago, replaced by a silence from authorities that speaks louder than any announcement. Around you, structures that have stood for generations groan under stresses they were never designed to endure. The air feels heavy, pressing against your chest with an atmospheric density that fluctuates as gravitational fields compete and merge. Above, Apophis Major dominates half the sky. No longer a distant threat, but an overwhelming presence. Its dark surface textured with craters and ridges now visible without magnification. You watch as pieces of the moon drift past in slow motion, some trailing fire, others dark and silent. The ground beneath your feet vibrates with a deep frequency that resonates in your bones, a tremor that never stops, only varies in intensity. You hear the cascade of glass from windows failing blocks away, the rumble of buildings settling into new configurations, the distant roar of the ocean responding to tides that no longer make sense. You descend into streets filled with abandoned vehicles and scattered belongings. The temperature has dropped 15 degrees in the past hour as the approaching mass blocks solar radiation. Your breath forms clouds in air that should be warm for this latitude and season. You pass through intersections where traffic lights still cycle through their programmed sequences, red and green illuminating nobody, marking order in a world where order has ceased to have meaning. The sky pulses with light as electrical storms crown the horizon, generated by atmospheric ionization from the gravitational shearing. You feel the pull now, a slight but unmistakable sensation of being drawn upward, as if weight itself has become negotiable. Loose papers and dust rise slowly from the ground, hovering in defiance of normal physics before falling back. You run toward what was once designated a shelter, though you know the futility. The sound of the world ending is not a roar, but a deepening hum, a bass note that resonates through everything, growing louder with each passing hour. The science is simple in its horror. When an object of Apophis Major's mass approaches a planet, it does not need to physically strike the surface to obliterate it. Gravity alone becomes the weapon. Imagine Earth as a water balloon held together by its own internal forces. Now imagine a second balloon, larger and heavier, pressing against it. The Roche limit defines the distance at which tidal forces overcome gravitational binding. For a body of Earth's composition facing an approaching mass of this magnitude, that limit was crossed 2 days ago. The planet begins to deform. The crust stretches on the side facing the intruder, compresses on the opposite hemisphere. Magma beneath the surface finds new pathways. The oceans rise, not in waves, but in sustained bulges, kilometers high. The atmosphere, least bound of all, begins to stream away toward the approaching mass, drawn into a bridge of air connecting two worlds. The final hours arrive without ceremony. Apophis Major fills the entire sky, its surface details now visible in terrifying clarity. Ancient impact craters, mountain ranges that dwarf anything on Earth, canyons that could swallow entire countries. The object has not deviated. Every calculation, every desperate hope that it might pass at a safe distance, has proven false. The trajectory is absolute. At 200,000 kilometers, Earth's atmosphere begins its exodus. Visible streams of air arc upward like auroras made of oxygen and nitrogen, glowing as friction heats the fleeing gases. The atmospheric pressure at sea level drops catastrophically. Oceans boil not from heat, but from the sudden reduction in pressure. Vast regions of water converting to steam that joins the exodus skyward. Continental shelves crack as the water weight vanishes. The crust, no longer pressed down by oceanic mass, rebounds violently. Mountain ranges rise meters in minutes, valleys collapse into themselves. Seismic waves circle the planet in continuous loops, each passage adding energy to the next, building resonances that fragment bedrock into powder. Volcanoes erupt simultaneously across every tectonic boundary, not from isolated magma chambers, but from wholesale liquefaction of the upper mantle. The sky turns black with ash and steam and dust, illuminated only by lightning that arcs between ground and the ionized atmospheric bridge stretching toward Apophis Major. The Earth's rotation slows further, then stops, then begins to reverse as tidal locking forces assert dominance. One side of the planet now faces permanently toward the approaching doom, baking under gravitational stress, while the other freezes in sudden shadow. The magnetic field collapses as the core's convection patterns disrupt. Solar wind, no longer deflected, streams directly into what remains of the upper atmosphere, stripping away particles in brilliant displays of green and purple light. At 50,000 kilometers, the Roche limit is fully breached. The planet fractures. Not explosively, but in a slow-motion disintegration that would be majestic if it were not annihilation. The crust splits along lines of weakness, great plates lifting away from the mantle beneath, drifting into space as solid continents become temporary satellites. The oceans, already mostly vapor, form a vast nebula around the disintegrating world. Magma, released from pressure, fountains into vacuum, where it freezes instantly into glassy strands kilometers long. The core itself, iron and nickel, compressed by the weight of the entire planet above it, begins to expand as that weight disappears. Earth ceases to be a sphere and becomes a debris field, a spreading cloud of rock and metal and ice, each fragment following its own orbital path around the intruder that consumed a world without ever touching it. Apophis Major passes through the remnants, its trajectory barely altered by the encounter. The mass it has captured adds negligibly to its own. It continues inward toward the sun, dragging with it a diffuse ring of material that was once mountains and cities and oceans and atmosphere. Behind it, in Earth's former orbital path, a belt of debris begins to form. Fragments collide and shatter. Smaller pieces spiral into the sun. Larger chunks drift outward, some eventually captured by Mars or Venus, others destined to orbit in the space between worlds for millions of years. The moon's remains join this cosmic graveyard, indistinguishable now from terrestrial debris. Where there was a blue world, there is only scattered stone and fading heat. A temporary brightness in the infrared spectrum marking where thermal energy still radiates from molten fragments. In time, the debris field will settle into a ring, similar to those surrounding the outer planets, but thinner and less stable. Some material will coalesce under its own gravity, forming dozens of small bodies, none larger than a few hundred kilometers across. These orphaned worlds will be airless, waterless, dead. They will orbit the sun in the habitable zone where Earth once thrived, a memorial to the fragility of worlds. Solar radiation will slowly erode them. Micrometeorite impacts will grind them smaller. In 10 million years, perhaps less, even the ring will disperse, spread so thin across so vast a distance that no trace will remain. The solar system will appear as if Earth never existed, a gap in the planetary sequence where life once looked up at the stars and wondered. The universe will not notice, the stars will shine unchanged, and somewhere in the darkness between systems, Apophis Major will continue its eternal drift, bearing within its gravitational memory the ghost of a world it destroyed without malice, without awareness, by simply passing through.